The Festival of Lanterns was the pride of Hino, a small coastal town nestled between forested hills and the wide blue sea. Every August, hundreds of people gathered to release glowing paper lanterns into the river, believing that the gentle lights carried the spirits of the dead safely back to the afterlife. The air would always be filled with the sound of drums, laughter, and the scent of grilled squid from the food stalls lining the narrow streets. For generations, it had been a time of joy, family, and remembrance. But in 2021, that same festival would mark the beginning of a story that would haunt Japan for years to come. That year, the festival was particularly busy. After months of restrictions and quiet streets, people were eager to celebrate again. Among the returning visitors was Mai Sato, a 24-year-old art student from Tokyo. She had grown up in Hino but moved away after high school, rarely looking back. Her parents had passed away in a car accident when she was a teenager, and her grandmother, who had raised her afterward, had died 2 years earlier. Still, something had drawn her back this summer, a mix of nostalgia and curiosity about the stories her grandmother used to tell her about the river and the lights that never went out. Mai wasn't the kind to join the crowds or take part in loud celebrations. She was quiet, observant, and happiest behind her camera. Locals who saw her that night remembered her wearing a pale blue yukata, patterned with white cranes. She had her long hair tied back and a small camera slung around her neck. Many recalled her moving slowly through the crowd, pausing often to take pictures of the glowing lanterns and the faces illuminated by their flickering light. Her photos always seemed to capture details others overlooked: the shimmer of reflection on water, the expressions of children gazing at the river, the stillness between the noise. Around 10 o'clock, the crowd began to thin. The elderly made their way home, and families gathered at the bridges to watch the last of the lanterns drift toward the sea. Mai stayed behind, following the riverbank until it curved toward the base of Hino Shrine Hill. That area was darker, quieter, and less crowded. A single streetlight buzzed near the old wooden torii gate that marked the entrance to the path leading up to the shrine. Locals often avoided it after dark. The shrine had a strange reputation. Some said it was haunted by spirits of fishermen lost in a storm 100 years ago. Others whispered about a curse, about the lights that appeared in the trees when no festival was being held. At 10:32 p.m., a security camera from a nearby convenience store caught a brief, grainy image of Mai walking toward that gate. The timestamp was clear. The next frame showed nothing but the swaying trees. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, the town woke to bright sun and the faint smell of smoke from the burnt-out lanterns that had washed ashore. When Mai didn't return to her aunt's house, where she had been staying, her cousin grew worried and went out to look for her. The police were called by noon. A few hours later, a search party found her camera lying halfway up the shrine steps. Its lens was cracked, and the battery compartment was open. The memory card was missing. Her phone was never recovered. The police treated it as a missing persons case. At first, people assumed she had simply wandered off or fallen somewhere in the forest. Hino was surrounded by dense woods, and it wasn't uncommon for travelers to lose their way. But there was something strange about how her camera had been found placed neatly beside the steps, as if someone wanted it to be discovered. As evening fell, officers searched the shrine grounds, their flashlights cutting through the mist that rolled in from the sea. They found no signs of struggle, no footprints, no clothing, nothing but the faint sound of the forest and the rhythmic croak of frogs near the river. Still, one officer later claimed that when he reached the top of the steps, he smelled smoke not from lanterns or incense, but from burning wood. Though no fire was seen, by dawn, the town was filled with rumors. Some said Mai had disturbed something sacred, that she shouldn't have gone near the shrine after dark. Others whispered that someone had followed her there, someone who didn't want the past uncovered. Within days, news of her disappearance spread beyond Hino. Journalists began arriving, cameras flashing where hers had gone silent, and so began the story that would soon be called the festival murder that shook Japan. Though 3 days after Mai Sato vanished, the quiet town of Hino began to change. What had once been a cheerful place, filled with the laughter of children and the sound of waves, now felt suffocating. Posters with Mai's smiling face were taped to lampposts and shop windows, fluttering in the sea breeze. Her image was everywhere, young, bright, alive, and yet there was no sign of her anywhere. Dozens of volunteers joined the police in searching the surrounding forests and riverbanks. They combed through fields, checked abandoned sheds, and waded into the shallow parts of the river where lanterns had drifted only days before. On the third morning, a group of local volunteers made their way up the forested slope behind Hino's shrine. The area was thick with cedar trees, their trunks dark and wet from a recent rainstorm. Just beyond a narrow clearing, one of the searchers spotted something pale caught on a branch. It was a torn piece of fabric blue with faint white cranes, the same pattern Mai had worn to the festival. Nearby, tangled in the roots of an old cedar, lay a silver charm bracelet engraved with the letters M. It shimmered faintly under the beam of a flashlight. Detective Kenji Mori, a seasoned investigator from Nagasaki Prefecture, arrived later that day to take charge of the case. He was known for his calm manner and almost obsessive attention to detail. Tall, quiet, and methodical. He preferred to listen before speaking, which made people nervous. Within hours, he had the entire area around the shrine cordoned off. The first thing he noticed was how still everything seemed. The forests, the shrine, even the wind. It was as if the place was holding its breath. Forensic teams searched the scene carefully. They found footprints leading toward the back of the shrine. Though rain had washed most of them away, mud samples were taken, and the torn piece of Mai's yukata was sent for testing. Behind the shrine's altar, an officer discovered an old wooden box covered in dust and cobwebs. Inside were several yellowed photographs showing a group of men standing near the river. One of the pictures was marked with a date August 14th, 1996. In the corner of another image, barely visible, appeared to be what looked like a wrapped human figure lying on the ground. When Morimoto showed the photos to local officials, their faces tightened. Most of them refused to speak. The former mayor Shohei Igarashi dismissed the images as fakes, claiming they were part of old festival rituals. Yet the detective could see fear in their eyes. He knew there was something in those photographs that no one wanted to acknowledge. As investigators began digging deeper, more disturbing details surfaced. Through her social media accounts, they learned that Mai had been researching local legends for an upcoming art exhibition in Tokyo. One legend in particular stood out: the story of Taroku, a fisherman who, according to folklore, had drowned at sea after defying a divine warning. His restless spirit was said to appear every year at the festival, searching for another soul to take his place. Mai had posted photos of the shrine and cryptic captions like "The town hides more than ghosts." The last entry on her blog, made the morning of her disappearance, read simply, "Some truths should never stay buried." Detective Morimoto wondered if Mai's research had brought her close to something dangerous, something that wasn't just an old story. When he questioned the townspeople, many grew visibly uncomfortable. Elderly residents refused to meet his eyes. Shop owners closed early, muttering about curses and bad luck. It was as though the entire town had silently agreed not to speak. Later that week, forensic tests confirmed that the fabric and bracelet belonged to Mai. No blood was found, but traces of soil on the fabric matched the type found near the shrine's altar. Morimoto returned to the site alone one evening, hoping to understand what had drawn her there. He walked slowly up the mossy steps, flashlight in hand. Near the altar, the beam caught something faintly etched into the wood: three carved symbols, resembling waves or ripples. Beneath them, scratched in newer lines, were the initials M. It was unclear whether Mai had carved them or someone else had done it afterward. Either way, it was a message. Deliberate and unsettling. When Morimoto reviewed the security footage from the festival, another detail stood out. At 10:30 p.m., just before Mai appeared, walking toward the shrine, a shadowy figure could be seen at the edge of the frame. It wasn't clear enough to identify a tall person wearing dark clothing, standing perfectly still near the torii gate. 2 minutes later, Mai entered the same frame and continued up the path. The figure did not move. For Morimoto, this was no longer a simple missing person case. The torn yukata, the hidden photos, and the silence of the townspeople all pointed to something much larger. Someone in Hino knew what had happened to Mai Sato. Someone was protecting a secret, one buried in the roots of the shrine and kept alive by fear. And if the old stories were to be believed, It wasn't the first time the Festival of Lanterns had ended in tragedy. The discovery of the photographs behind the shrine altar sent waves of unease through Hino. The images, aged and yellowed, hinted at a past the town had long buried. Detective Kenji Morimoto studied each picture in his small temporary office near the harbor, his desk covered in papers, maps, and evidence bags. The men in the photographs were clearly recognizable town officials, business owners, and even the former mayor, Shohei. All were much younger then, standing stiffly beside what looked unmistakably like a human body wrapped in a tarp. The date scrawled on the back of one photo, August 14th, 1996, haunted him. That was the same night a 16-year-old girl named Aiko Hana had vanished during the Festival of Lanterns. The 1996 disappearance had been briefly investigated before being written off as a runaway case. The girl's family had moved away soon after, leaving her memory to fade into rumor. But the discovery of those photos changed everything. Morimoto reopened the old case file and began searching through police archives. The similarities between ICO's disappearance and Mai Sato's were chilling. Both had vanished on the night of the festival. Both had last been seen near the shrine, and both had shown an interest in the darker stories surrounding Hino's past. When the detective quietly began questioning people connected to the 1996 case, he met resistance. The few who agreed to speak seemed nervous, constantly glancing toward the door. They described how, after Aiko vanished, there had been talk of strange lights on the shrine hill and the sound of drums long after the festival had ended. Then, as quickly as the gossip had started, it stopped. Shohei Igarashi, then a rising politician, had ordered everyone to let the dead rest. Soon after, the matter disappeared from local news. Meanwhile, Mai's online activity began to draw new attention. A journalist named Reina Kobayashi, who had been following Mai's art projects for a magazine feature, contacted Morimoto. She revealed that 2 weeks before the disappearance, Mai had sent her an encrypted email titled, "They Lied About Aiko." The file attached to it was damaged and unreadable, but the message was clear. Mai had discovered something linking the old case to the festival. Reina had tried to contact Mai afterward but received no response. Morimoto now believed Mai had stumbled upon evidence of a cover-up. Perhaps she had found the same photographs he now held in his hands. Or maybe something even worse. The question was who else knew and how far they were willing to go to keep it hidden. The detective began piecing together a timeline. He learned that in the weeks before the festival, Mai had visited the town archives, asking about missing persons reports from the 1990s. She had also met privately with an elderly fisherman named Shunpei, one of the last people to have worked on the river during that time. 2 days before her disappearance, Takada was hospitalized after what was described as a fall from his boat. He never regained consciousness. Morimoto's instincts told him the events were connected. The deeper he looked, the more the town's history seemed to rot from the inside. Old records hinted that the Festival of Lanterns had not always been a cheerful celebration. Centuries ago it had been a purification ritual meant to appease sea spirits after disasters. One name appeared repeatedly in local folklore: Taro Kusanagi, the drowned fisherman. According to legend, the townspeople had offered him a human sacrifice each generation to calm his anger and protect the village from storms. The ritual, known only to the shrine priests and a select few, was said to have ended long ago. But had it really? Late one night, Morimoto sat in his car outside the darkened shrine, thinking about the missing pieces. He imagined Mai standing there, camera in hand, piecing together the same story. Perhaps she had realized that the ghosts the town feared were not spirits at all, but peoplemen who had kept an ancient ritual alive under the guise of tradition. If she had confronted them or caught them on film, that could have sealed her fate. When Morimoto presented his findings to the prefectural police board, he was told to proceed carefully. Several of the men in the photos were still influential, and the local government feared public panic. But the detective didn't stop. He ordered a forensic analysis of the old photographs, confirming they were authentic and had not been digitally altered. The figures in them matched records of those who had served on the 1996 festival committee. Soon after, a new rumor spread through Hino. Someone claimed to have seen a lantern glowing on the river weeks after the festival ended, drifting against the current. Others swore they heard a woman's voice near the shrine steps calling faintly through the mist. Fear returned to the town, stronger than before. By now, the story of Mai Sato's disappearance was on national television. Reporters camped outside the police station, asking if the two cases were connected. The official answer was vague, but within Hino, whispers grew louder. Some said Mai had uncovered the truth about Aiko Hanamura's death. Others believed both women had become sacrifices in a ritual that had never truly stopped. For Detective Moore, the truth was beginning to take shape, but it was darker than he could have imagined. The town's festival, once seen as a symbol of hope, was built upon a foundation of fear and blood, and someone was still keeping that tradition alive. In early April of 2022, heavy rain fell over Hino for 5 straight days. The usually calm river that ran through the town swelled beyond its banks, flooding fields and carrying away debris from the mountains. When the storm finally passed, the people of Hino emerged to clean the muddy roads and collect what the water had left behind. On the third morning of the cleanup, a fisherman named Takumi Endo was clearing debris near a bend in the river when his net snagged something heavy. Thinking it was a log, he tugged it closer to shore, only to realize it was an old brown suitcase, covered in algae and half buried in the riverbank. The zipper was rusted shut, and a foul smell rose from it as he dragged it onto the rocks. By the time he opened it, what he saw made him drop his lantern and run straight to the police. Detective Kenji Morimoto arrived an hour later. The suitcase had been brought to a tent near the water and sealed off with police tape. When the forensics team unzipped it, they found human remains wrapped in fabric that had once been blue, now faded and shredded from months underwater. A plastic charm bracelet, tarnished but still recognizable, was clasped around one wrist. The sight silenced everyone. Within days, DNA testing confirmed what the detective already suspected. The remains were those of Mai Sato. The autopsy report was grim. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Marks around her wrists and ankles suggested she had been tied up, and traces of rope fibers were found embedded in the skin. There were no defensive wounds, meaning she had likely been unconscious before she was placed in the suitcase. The medical examiner estimated she had died on the same night she disappeared. Yet one small object stood out. Hidden inside the torn sleeve of her yukata was a micro SD card, its surface scratched but intact. When the forensic team managed to recover its data, they discovered 23 photographs taken on the night of the festival. Most were typical shots of lanterns, crowds, and river reflections. But the final few images told a different story. The last sequence began at 10:21 p.m. 8 minutes before the convenience store camera captured my walking toward the shrine. One photo showed the torii gate glowing faintly in the lantern light. Another captured a distant figure standing at the edge of the trees, holding what seemed to be a lantern of their own. In the next image, the figure was closer. Though still blurry, their face obscured. The final photograph, time-stamped 10:29 p.m., appeared to be a mirror reflection of Mai herself, her face pale and frightened, her mouth slightly open as if gasping. Behind her, the blurred outline of another person could be seen, tall and thin, with their arm raised. The photo ended there. Morimoto studied those images for hours, trying to understand what Mai had seen. He had them enhanced by a digital forensics expert, but the second figure remained too indistinct to identify. The only new detail revealed was a faint emblem on the lantern, a circular crest resembling waves. The same symbol had been carved into the wooden altar at the shrine and appeared in the old photographs from 1996. The detective became certain that Mai's death was connected to the old festival committee. He tracked down every surviving member of the group. Some had moved away. Others still lived quietly in Hino. One of them, a retired shopkeeper named Hirato Nagumine, agreed to speak. In a trembling voice, he told Morimoto that during the 1996 festival, something had gone wrong with the ritual meant to bless the river. A girl, he said, had been offered to the water, but it had been decided never to speak of it again. He refused to say more and died of heart failure 2 weeks later. Morimoto's notes grew darker with each page. He began to believe that the town had preserved its ancient purification rite in secret. The festival that everyone celebrated had once involved chosen victim meant to appease the sea's anger and ensure good fortune. In 1996, that victim had been Aiko Hanamori. In 2021, it had been Mai Sato. The news of the body's discovery spread quickly across Japan. Reporters flooded into Hino once again, turning the once quiet town into a storm of flashing cameras and satellite vans. The mayor issued a statement, mourning Mai's death, but avoided answering questions about the shrine or the legend of Tarokuzana. For many residents, the discovery of the suitcase confirmed their worst fears that the curse of the river was real, and the spirits had returned for vengeance. But Morimoto did not believe in curses. He believed in people and the terrible things they could do when bound by tradition and fear. Late one night, he returned alone to the riverbank where the suitcase had been found. The moonlight shimmered on the water's surface, and the current whispered softly against the stones. He imagined Mai's final moments, her camera flashing in the dark, the sound of drums echoing faintly from the town below. Somewhere behind her, someone had been watching, waiting for the moment when the last lantern disappeared into the distance. Then the darkness had swallowed everything. The detective knew now that the past was repeating itself, and unless he found proof of who had continued the ritual, more lights would vanish into the river before long. In the spring of 2023, nearly 2 years after Mai Sato's disappearance, Hino was no longer the peaceful seaside town it once was. The shops that had thrived during the Festival of Lanterns were closed and shuttered. The streets were empty, and the once colorful banners that decorated the harbor were gone. The festival committee had disbanded, and locals spoke of the event only in whispers. To outsiders, Hino seemed like a town that had lost its soul. But Detective Kenji Morimoto knew the truth ran deeper. Something in Hino had been broken long before Mai Sato was killed, and he was determined to uncover the rot that had poisoned it. Months had passed since the discovery of Mai's body, but Morimoto had refused to close the case. Too many questions remained unanswered. The mysterious photographs, the old ritual symbols, and the silence from the townspeople all pointed to a secret that had festered for decades. Then, one afternoon, an anonymous letter arrived at the Nagasaki Prefectural Police Office. The envelope contained no return address, only a message typed on plain paper: "Search Shohei Igarashi's house. The truth is buried below." The note was unsigned, but attached to it was a small photo one of the same wave-like symbols seen on the shrine altar. The detective wasted no time. With a warrant secured, a small team accompanied him to the abandoned home of Shohei, the former mayor of Hino, and one of the men photographed in the 1996 images. The house stood on a hill overlooking the sea, its windows broken, its interior thick with dust. It had been vacant since Igarashi had left town following the reopening of the investigation. As they searched each room, the sound of waves crashing outside mixed with the echo of their footsteps. Then, in the back of the house, they found a trapped door hidden beneath an old rug. The hinges were rusted, but after forcing it open, they discovered a narrow staircase leading into the ground. The cellar was filled with old boxers, ceremonial objects, and photographs. On a wooden table rested a shrine lantern, its glass cracked but still etched with the same swirling emblem that had appeared in Mai's final photos. Inside another box, Morimoto found dozens of photographs sealed in plastic. The images documented a series of late-night gatherings in the woods behind Hino Shrine. Men in traditional festival clothing stood in a circle, holding torches. In one photograph, a figure dressed in a white yukata appeared to be kneeling at the center of the group, surrounded by symbols drawn in ash. Another image showed the same group near the river, their faces half lit by the glow of lanterns. At the edge of one photo, a young girl's face was visibly Hanamura. As Morimoto examined the final set of pictures, he froze. One image had been altered digitally. It showed both Aiko and Mai together, side by side, their faces calm and pale, as if posed after death. The caption scrawled beneath it read, "The lanterns must keep floating." The evidence was overwhelming. It proved that the town's leaders had continued performing the ancient purification ritual long after it was believed to have ended. The victims Aiko in 1996 and Mai in 2021 had been sacrifices chosen to ensure the prosperity of Hino. The ritual demanded a pure offering, someone tied to the town's bloodline. Maya, who had returned after years away, had unknowingly become their next blessing. When she uncovered the truth, they silenced her. But before Morimoto could move to make arrests, news arrived that Shohei Igarashi had been found dead in the same house, his body discovered by a neighbor who'd noticed a light on the night before. The cause was declared suicide. On his desk, next to an extinguished lantern, was a handwritten note: "Forgive us. The festival must continue in other ways." No fingerprints were found except his own. The public demanded answers, but the case soon reached a dead end. Many of the men identified in the photos had already died or disappeared. Without living witnesses, the prefectural office ordered the case closed, citing insufficient evidence for prosecution. Morimoto was furious, but powerless. The files were sealed, and Hino faded once again into silence. Yet the story didn't end there. In late summer, weeks after the investigation was officially closed, fishermen began reporting strange lights near the mouth of the river. The lights looked like lanterns, glowing faintly blue as they drifted upstream against the current. Some claimed to hear the faint click of a camera shutter in the mist. Others said they saw a young woman standing by the torii gate at the top of the hill, her pale yukata fluttering in the wind. The townspeople refused to speak of it, but a few who had known Mai whispered that she had returned, not as a ghost seeking revenge, but as a reminder. Her death had ended the festival, yet her presence lingered like the lanterns she loved to photograph, soft, glowing, and eternal. Detective Morimoto left Hino soon after, unable to bear the weight of the unanswered questions. But every year, on the night of the old festival, he would receive a single photograph in the mail. No message, no sender, just a picture of the river at night, the surface scattered with blue light, and in the distance, the outline of a woman holding a lantern. It was always taken from the same angle Mai had used, and with each new photo, the current seemed to glow a little brighter, as if the dead were still floating home.